All right, we just rolled out of Kentucky Lake, the Dam Marina up here. Same place you launched out of for 4 days straight. We got Jason Lambert, guy who almost caught 100 pounds on Kentucky Lake, but hey, it's better than second place.
It's always better than second place, and I guess if I hadn't stumbled and only had 18.9 on Thursday, then we could have broke 100. But you know, 29-pound stringers don't come along very often. No. That's just a special day, and you know, what better day to have it than day 4 of an FLW Tour tournament. So,
that's right.
Good week, man, good week.
So we're here one more day. Jason's gonna show us how to go catch these fish offshore here on Kentucky Lake.
Ledge fishing is it's became more of an art, basically. And it's you know, everybody's got electronics now, and everybody can ride around and find them. There's certain things that, you know, catching them is still the deal. I mean, there's always fish in a lot of different places, and I guess the key for me this week and every week when it comes to ledge tournament, but especially this week, is just spending all the time that I possibly can idling in practice, so I can find every possible location that I can fish.
Sure.
The problem you run into in events like this past week is, you know, we got 160 guys out here, and then you got local tournaments, and you got people that like to fish.
Yeah.
I mean, we're not asking them to quit fishing just because we're fishing a tournament. So the key for me is just to find and locate as many schools as I possibly can. You know, the downside to that sometimes is kind of what happened to me Thursday. You know, we spend so much time idling in practice and looking and looking and looking and looking, and we don't spend enough time fishing. And every time you come to Kentucky Lake, just because it's Kentucky Lake, it doesn't mean they're going to bite the same bait or the same color, same speed. And we don't spend enough time in practice really fishing for them and learning how to catch them we're looking for. When you see that right there, it's usually a very good sign. That's 20 or 30 fish school, and they're pretty tight together. So those fish can probably be caught. Well, actually, let me rephrase that. It's not a 20 fish school. It's still going. Cool thing with electronics now, though, is, you know, I can go right here and I can pause this, and I can touch that screen, and I can drop me a waypoint. And now I've got a dot right exactly where those fish are.
Yeah.
So, you know, once I've seen them, I know they're there, but also when I pinpoint that waypoint there, I can ride back over them and look at them again. I can stop and fish them. I know exactly where they are. You know, technology's came a long way, and it's really changed the game out here. And the guys that have gotten good at it are the guys that you're starting to see at the tops of the leaderboards and all these ledge events every time. It's key. I mean, it's absolutely key to really learn how to look at these things. And, you know, I enjoy it. A lot of guys, oh man, it's boring. How do you sit in a boat for 3 days and look at a graph and look at a graph and look at a graph? And to me, part of the fun is just finding them. You know, and I'll go 4, 5, 6 hours sometimes and just look at crazy stuff, off the wall stuff that I've never looked at or never seen fish on. And then you see a school and it's like, man, I might can win here, you know. And it's just finding that fresh spot that's not getting fished as much. You know, the key to me on this area here was it is a community hole. It's a mega school most of the time. But I was fishing the outliers, you know, the fish that, you know, it's a little small group that was a couple 100 yards off of the main area where everybody else is fishing. And I just think those fish get a chance to freshen up better. I mean, I think they get a chance to get refreshed and rest, and then when they see a bait, they're more likely to bite. I figured it might be a little difficult to catch them today. I mean, there's only been 160 boats pounding on them for 4 straight days, basically. But you know, back to yesterday, I mean, it's just, I've spent so much time up here. I mean, I come up here and fun fish a lot, and you know, I got a good friend of mine, Mr. Rick Kelly's got a place down at Paris, and I stay at his place and come up and just spend a couple days just idling, looking, and getting to know the lake a little better. And you know, we've had a lot of success up here, and you know, it's treated me real well. But man, I've also had a couple painful ride homes in them seconds. But you know, yesterday was, you know, you always hear about that magical day, that perfect day, and yesterday kind of turned out to be that way. And a lot of it was just, you know, there was no fishing pressure.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that, there was no local tournaments basically. It was so hot and miserable.
Oof.
I mean, who had wanted to fun
Yeah,
fish
no kidding.
yesterday? I mean, it was brutal. I mean, there was no wind. It was 97 degrees. It was awful. But it just, you know, we had free run of the lake, and it just seemed like after about 10:30 that the switch clicked on, and man, we crushed them for about 3 or 4 hours. And
yeah,
I mean, you just don't, those days don't happen, and you got to enjoy them. And you know, it was a pretty cool ride back from Paris yesterday afternoon at about 40 miles an hour, just cruising back. But you know, still there's always that thought in the back of your mind. You know, you don't know exactly what they weigh till you put them in a basket.
Right.
And you know, I've already had a couple seconds, and you still got that thought. But you know, it's not a bad feeling to ride back with 29 pounds.
I thought it was pretty funny yesterday when you said, I don't know, you had like 19, 20 pounds, something like that. And you're like, just one more 5-pounder, one more 5-pounder.
Yeah.
And then you're like, but the thing about fishermen is we're pretty greedy. So I say that, I'll catch one, and then I'll be like, one more 5-pounder.
Yeah.
And it actually kind of worked out that way.
Yeah,
I mean,
it did.
shoot, you had 5-pounders on a balance beam, man.
Yeah, those days don't. I mean, I'm almost certain that I've never caught a 5-pound fish in my life. I mean, not in a tournament.
Right.
I mean, we've had fun days where we've caught 30 pounds. But you know, as far as putting them on a scale and weighing them, I mean that's the second biggest stringer I ever caught in my entire life, and in any kind of event. And it just, you know, again, it's just one of those days when it seems like when it's your time, it's your time. And you know, one of the things that really happened, I guess, it started happening Thursday afternoon when I kind of got an idea of what was going on. You know, I threw that big heavy metal spoon a lot, cast X spoon, and I threw the big V&M 10-inch worm. I drug it around a lot, the J-Pros worm. And I caught some fish on a drop shot the first day that was real difficult to catch. But it seemed like Thursday afternoon, I pulled to this spot and I picked this big jerky J up, and I caught one real fast, like the first cast in there. I only had like 9 minutes left. And I saw him, I picked it up, threw in there, I caught like a 4.5 pounder. I coiled and I run straight in, and I checked in with like 15 seconds to spare. And then Friday morning, I started out here and I caught some on a drop shot, and then I picked swim bait up and I caught a couple. And I left here finally with a limit. Didn't weigh a whole lot, but it's, you know, it's a 17, 18 pound limit. But as the day went on, I threw the spoon, caught a few fish, still threw the worm, caught a few fish. Friday, probably about 2 or 3 o'clock, I just made a decision, and it was a tactical decision. I knew that I had enough weight to fish Saturday. So Saturday, we don't have a net guy. It's us. And one thing that really scares me about, you know, not necessarily the worm so much, but the spoon especially.
Oh yeah.
It's just, I mean, any treble hook bait, when you're fishing it by yourself, you've got to run the net, lots of things can go wrong. So I actually picked this thing up Friday. I mean, when you look at this bait, it's one big hook.
Yeah.
And the chances and likelihood of losing a fish on that bait versus a spoon or a crankbait or anything else is way, way, way less. So I actually chose Friday afternoon to fish that bait solely for the last couple hours. I had the late day anyway. I didn't check in at like 4:45. I crushed them Friday evening. I weighed like 24.4 or whatever that first day. So I basically had 2 rods that I threw the rest of the tournament. I threw a swim bait and I threw a crankbait. I had long line crankbait, threw a few schools just to see if I could get them to fire. But primarily, every fish I weighed in the last 2 days come on this swim bait. And it all started from just a tactical decision.
Right.
And just picking it up to, I guess, just make myself throw it for a couple hours to see if I can make them bite it. I caught them so good on it that afternoon, I had confidence in it. And once I got the confidence to throw it, I basically threw it the rest of the tournament. And, you know, when you get dialed into one bait and one rhythm and one cadence, and you do it over and over and over, and you got the confidence in it, you know, some people won't call it momentum and call it whatever. To me, it's just confidence.
Yeah.
Pick it up, throw it, and when you throw it, it's like, you may not catch one this cast, but you know if you just keep throwing it. And the one thing about it was, I didn't catch a bunch of small fish yesterday.
No,
I didn't catch a bunch of small fish Friday. I mean, I didn't catch a whole lot of fish like Kentucky Lake typically is, but when I caught them, they were good ones. I mean, our boat guy yesterday followed us, said that he was counting. He said I caught over 15 fish that were over 4 pounds.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I was in a little hurry. I had other things on my mind other than counting fish, but I don't know how many I caught, but it was a lot. And it was a fun day. So, you know, those days don't come along very often. Enjoy them. And, you know, hopefully we'll have another one somewhere down the line.
Heck yeah.
Now I'm just looking forward to getting to Champlain and a little bit cooler temperatures.
Yeah, I'm tired of this.
And fishing, I've never been there, so it's going to be a new experience for me. I don't know how big he was when he jumped, but he feels like he's
He ain't little, let's put it that way.
yeah, he's not a dink. Not a dink at all.
Heck yeah, man. Get on up in here. Look at that tail.
Yeah. 4 pounder.
Chunky.
Tail still red. And we saw him before we caught him.
Yeah.
The star of the show this week for me has been primarily, the last 2 days pretty much exclusively, this giant jerky J from Castaic. This is a green shad color, and you know, I threw the 5-inch a little bit, but the last couple of days it just seemed like when you're looking for the big bites, it was all about the big bait. So it's a 7-inch bait, it's a straight tail bait, you know, make a paddle tail as well. And I threw it a lot first couple of days, but for some reason, whatever reason, I just really got dialed into this one particular lure the last 2 days. I threw it on a 1 ounce, you know, vibrating head. The setup is just basically your custom everyday, you know, swim bait setup. It's a 710 heavy action, you know, Micro Magic Duckett rod. It's a, you know, it's a good long rod with a lot of backbone. So when you get a long cast out there and get a bite on it, you can get that hook drove home real good. It's a 6'3", 360 RW Duckett fishing reel. You know, to me the speed is pretty important by keeping that bait, you know, in contact with the bottom. It's a 6.3 to 1. You know, it's pretty imperative that that bait stays on the bottom of these ledge fish. I don't care what you're fishing. You know, any type of swim bait or crankbait or worm or jig or whatever, it's got to stay on the bottom. Line is just 17-pound Vicious Pro Elite fluorocarbon. You know, typically I throw 20-pound on this setup and almost always have, but for whatever reason this week the water at Kentucky Lake is a lot cleaner. It's cleaner than it usually is. It's like we just haven't had that algae bloom, we just haven't had the color yet. So stepped it down to the 17-pound, but that's pretty much the setup and turned out pretty well this week. You know, for the most part this week, other than early in the mornings, a lot of times you'd see the fish and they'd be scattered, you know, 2, 4, you know, they wouldn't be together, or you'd see them early in the mornings and they'd be, you know, really no bottom separation. They're just tucked to the bottom, and those fish are almost impossible to catch. So, but for the most part, all these schools that we looked at this week, they basically all look the same. I mean, they look like you could catch them, and I mean, we one fished them to death Friday and Saturday, and really Sunday too, until right at the end of the day. You know, we'd catch 1 or 2, and then that was it. I mean, they never would really fire. I mean, the only school that I would legitimately say I got to fire was that group yesterday afternoon. And when they fired, it just happened to be 5-pounders. And I mean, no more fortunate day for that to happen than the last day.
Well, so I think this week, in terms of offshore fishing, you know, last time we were on Kentucky Lake for the tour, you know, it was mega school this, mega school that. Even the series event 2 years ago was kind of the same. They just got out, but there were it seemed like there were big bunches of them. But this week you were talking about those little pods of fish, and like Terry Bolton and Brandon Hunter. I mean, a lot of the other guys that did well keyed in on that. Is that something Do you see that a lot on Pickwick as well? I mean, is that more of a common occurrence that you've had a lot of experience with?
You do see it a lot, especially when they first come out. When the fish are first getting out, it's more prevalent. It's really more prevalent here than it is at Pickwick when they first get out, because there's so many places on this lake. I mean, the thing that people don't understand the difference between the two lakes is, you know, from Kentucky Dam to Ken Lake, there's way more places to fish on this lake than there are the whole entire lake at Pickwick. And what happens or what seems to happen to me at Kentucky Lake is when they first start coming out, you'll have a lot of those 5 to 8 fish pods. And you know, that's when it's fun to me, because those electronics are what I like to do.
Yeah.
So I get to aisle around and find 50 places that's got fish on them. It seems like as the progression of the summer carries on and goes further and goes further and goes further, that it turns into, you know, 2 5-fish schools turn into a 10-fish school, and then all of a sudden another 8-fish school disappears and that other school gets bigger. It seems like those small schools just keep gravitating towards each other. And when, you know, once they get in those great big schools, if they're fresh and left alone, you can wreck them. But it's almost like the more they get caught, the more they get fished, the harder they are to catch. And I think a lot of what I caught this week, just like this location here, I mean, we know there's a mega school there. I was catching them 100 yards away, basically. And what I think happens to a lot of these big schools of fish when they start getting pressured is I think a lot of, you know, 5, 6, 8 little fish groups break off of that big school, and they pull away a couple 100 yards where they're comfortable. You know, water depth doesn't change much from here to there. You know, current doesn't change any from here to there. So they just find a little place close by that they're comfortable, and they just sit there. Well, everybody sees this big giant school and they fish it. They leave those alone.
Yeah. So
when you come in to fish those, they're fresh and they hadn't been beat on, they hadn't been fished. So that's, to me, that was the key for me for sure on Friday and Saturday. On Thursday, I actually fished some of the mega schools because I was out so early in the morning. Right. I was boat number 12. Now yesterday, every place we fished pretty much yesterday was a community hole with bigger schools on them. But I mean, that was a tactical choice because I knew that there wasn't going to be 900 boats on the water.
Makes sense.
You know, Kyle, one thing that I also think is critical, fishing ledge tournaments. A lot of talk, people don't believe in it, some do believe in it. I'm a firm believer in it, and that's that HydroWave.
Oh yeah.
I think that, you know, to me, if nothing else, it's a barrier between trolling motor noise, depth finder pings. But if I'm fishing a school of fish, it's playing. And it's just, I've done that for the last 5, 6, 7 years, and you know, ever since they kind of become a deal, and you know, Kevin kind of made that thing famous. Yep. And it's, to me, it's going to be turned on when I'm fishing a school of fish. That's just the way it is.
I was going to say, so when you start a day, do you just leave it on, or you pull it, you'll turn it on, pause it on?
When I pull a trolling motor up, I'll pause it, and then when I put the trolling motor back down, I'll turn it. You know, it's just got a simple play pause button on it. So, you know, I just hit the pause button, pull it up. You know, when I pull the trolling motor up, and then, you know, drop it back in, I'll hit play, and here we go.
Makes sense to me.
It's
you notice the difference too, like, can you get fish active in those situations where, you know, like no current, like they shouldn't bite, but you can actually, have you seen that help?
I've seen times, this week's just different, and I don't know what exactly is different. I don't know if it's the late spring, the cool nights, the spawn being so spread out like it was. I mean, there was fish spawned on this lake in the middle of March. Yeah. And then we're catching fish with bloody tails now. So I don't know if it's just, you know, the length of time that it took for the whole spawn to happen and the migration to happen. I mean, it's the first hot weather we've had too, to really push those fish out. But with that being said, I have seen times at Pickwick, just on the week, you know, through the week, when you're out there goofing off and fun fishing, having fun, where you pull up to a school and you can't make them bite, turn that thing on, 2 casts later, start catching them. Now, I have no scientific evidence that is what made those fish bite, but I also have no scientific evidence that it wasn't.
True.
So I'm not ledge fishing without a HydroWave. Uh-oh.
Right at the boat, son.
Put him on them.
Oh man, wait till you see the size of this thing.
Giant.
Wait for it.
Hey,
I'm trying to jump.
one thing, just one thing. When you get that fish in, don't let him hurt you.
What do I do with it now? do I grab it?
Just don't let him hurt you. I didn't know you could actually fish. All I ever see you holds a camera, not a pole.
Oh yeah, man. I get to stare at you long enough. I'm like, okay, if I do this, I had to let him catch the bigger ones just so everyone watching this understands. I mean, I know he caught 29 pounds yesterday, but I'm a nice host kind of guy. Well, Jason, I know it's getting late, and you got a long drive back home. Not a long drive, but you got to drive back home.
A few hours.
I figure we'll let you get rolling, but man, I really appreciate coming back out here on the lake you just spent 8 days on, and showing us all the cool little tips and tidbits about how to catch these ledge fish, these summertime fish out here on Kentucky Lake. And honestly, I'm really happy you won, because if I would have had to follow around a guy that got second again on Kentucky Lake, I would not want to have seen you at weigh-in. So congrats again, man. You got that coastal win at the beginning of the year. You got a tour win now.
It's been a good year. You know, I've had a terrible go for it. Actually, three events of the tour, but you know, 2 wins in a season is, I don't know. I mean, it's been a great year. It was a phenomenal week. Yesterday was, you know, a day for the books. It was great. I loved it, and those days don't come along very often, so I enjoyed it, man. Thanks for having me, and see you at Champlain.
Let's get out of here.